And welcome to today's session, Scaling Sales, the Little Caesars Fundraising Blueprint for CRM Optimization. I'm Christina Anderson, Marketing Strategist at Sercante Trilliad, and your host for today. Now, the reason why we're all here is because the CRM and sales technology has such a big impact on sales performance, and then also visibility into the pipeline, how sales skills are actually impacting deals, and that all impacts sales leadership and their ability to coach, forecast, and drive predictable growth. So because sales technology and CRM has such a big impact on all of this, we are going to be unpacking all of that in today's session. Everything from, is your CRM more of a roadblock or a revenue driver for your sales team, to how is it actually supporting your data layer and your AI initiatives? And then what are some enhancements and some of the frameworks that we can all incorporate to help better this technology for our organization to make our sellers better at what they do and ultimately give leadership the visibility they need to drive that predictable performance? And to help us unpack all of that today, I have a panel of experts that have joined us for our fireside chat, ready to give us their insights and expertise on this critical topic. So with that, Andrea, would you like to kick us off?
I'd be happy to. Yeah, I'm Andrea Fenton. Hello, Director of Marketing for Little Caesars Fundraising. Little Caesars Fundraising is part of the larger Little Caesars company, third largest pizza chain in the world. But what we do here on the fundraising side is we help schools, sports teams, and other community organizations raise money through simple turnkey fundraising programs by selling our pizza kit products. So I'm here to kind of share our expertise and a little bit about how we use Salesforce as a CRM tool to help manage those fundraising organizations.
Hello, everyone. Seth Mars. I'm responsible for strategy at Sandler. So handled all things around what our product is, how do we help our customers make sure that they get the most of the training that we provide and the other consulting work that we do. Prior to that, I spent 6 years at Forrester handling both upfront, like working with customers on process stuff, and then also the technology side. And then I've been a practitioner for 20 plus years before that in a whole bunch of different places.
And I'm Heather Rinke. I'm a product director focusing on CRM tech at Sercante, which is a Trilliad company. Sercante is the data and tech services arm of Trilliad, focused on helping organizations with their sales, marketing, and service tech stacks, and helping them use that to get measurable results. I've been in the tech space for over 20 years. I spent a lot of that time in the trenches alongside sales, as well as marketing and service, before moving into the partner ecosystem. And so today I work closely with organizations to help turn their CRM tech stack into that meaningful platform that helps teams utilize it for their business outcomes and drive growth.
Thank you all so much for being here today. I'm excited to dive in. So Heather, I loved how you said that I worked alongside sales in the trenches, and how you work with teams today to help them optimize their tech in order to drive growth. Because we are going to be diving into the sales and technology trenches today. And the fact of the matter is the stats say it all. It's rough out there, right? a lot of times the CRM in your sales technology often isn't set up for how your sales team operates. Sellers come in, there's legacy functionality that's in place, and it takes up their time. They're doing manual data entry, it's stalling deals, they're operating out of spreadsheets. Leadership isn't able to see what they need to, and all of this can have a big impact on what is actually happening then with your sales process. So, Andrea, to start off this conversation, I wanted to get your thoughts. I know that your team has done a lot of amazing work with optimizing the CRM and having it better aligned to your sales process. So, I wanted to kind of get like a before snapshot. So before the team started working to do all that optimization effort, what can you share, like what was happening? What was the sales process like? What was happening with lead management? How was the team using the system? And when you all made the decision to, okay, like we would really like to take action, what were you hoping to really get out of it in the end?
Yeah, I'm happy to take that question. I mean, I think you've got the keyword I'd use right there on the screen, which is our CRM wasn't for us. It was not helping us in any way. I mean, the system was very clunky. Marketing was doing their job in terms of bringing in leads up at the top of the funnel. And then obviously bringing those into Salesforce, which the expectation then would be our inside sales team would then convert those leads into fundraisers. Where things got really clunky and where things got lost is there just wasn't really any rigor or process built around that. And so what you had was a few different issues. One, there would be several attempts made on a lead, but there wasn't really any sort of status against any of those attempts. So it was hard for our sales team to know, was it a good lead? Was it a disqualified lead? Is it a lead who's not necessarily ready to make a decision right now? We as a leadership team had, nothing in terms of reporting to actually say, okay, we know we're bringing in this amount of leads. We may be converting this amount of leads, but what's happening to the rest of them? And over time, over years of that going on, you wound up with, what I jokingly called a lead cemetery, where you just had a ton of leads just sitting there in the funnel, and we couldn't tell you what happened to any of them. So it was, it wasn't the greatest experience. And in addition to that, we knew from a marketing perspective that we were actually going to come in and start doing a lot of our email marketing out of Marketing Cloud. And in order for us to do that, we also had to really clean up the data. It's the old adage of bad data in is bad data out. And we just had a ton of really bad data sitting in the system. So, we wanted to obviously optimize that lead flow process for our sales team. We wanted to give them better direction, as well as just some guidelines on how quickly to follow up with leads and sort of move them along in the lead funnel process. And then we wanted really great data on the marketing side of things so that we could do targeted messaging. We could try and meet those leads where they were at in their decision-making process. And then at a leadership level, we wanted to have some better reporting to really truly understand what was going on in that system, what was going on, what type of quality of leads did we have, so that we could then, potentially improve training with some of our sales reps. We could make better decisions from a marketing standpoint, and we could really just get a handle on, for every dollar we're spending, we can expect that we're going to convert X. So, us improving this foundation has really been critical to us, frankly, driving our business forward in all the right ways.
Thank you so much for sharing all of that. Some takeaways, I just wanted to recap the idea of the lead cemetery and not being able to actually see what's happening after that initial conversion, and that mystery of the lead statuses because there wasn't that rigor in that process that you mentioned earlier. And then that also poses difficulty, to your point, your leadership team, when you're trying to figure out like that predictability of, okay, we have X amount of leads typically coming in, what else is coming out, and then what are the efforts that we need to take in the meantime to continue to further them along that funnel. So thank you so much for sharing all of that. On that same topic of the impact in terms of visibility from the leadership end, Seth, I'd love to get your thoughts on this. Angie already kind of alluded to it from like a reporting and a coaching standpoint. What are some of the challenges that you're seeing sales leaders deal with when their technology isn't optimized or even aligned with their processes or even their methodologies?
The biggest thing that it creates is it reinforces the seller. I've got to do it all myself. So instead of technology working for them, they almost use it as a reason to do things on their own. So that has ramifications both for the company, because if you have a whole bunch of sellers doing everything their own way, they don't know how to get the leads from the cemetery. They don't know where it is because one person does it. Like they're all doing their own thing in their own way. Also, from a leadership standpoint, how do you coach someone that doesn't understand the process that is built within your technology? So if it's not working the way, like a lot of companies will build technology for a moment and then their company changes and the way they work changes, and then they're still forcing those sellers to work in technology that is not the process that they're working through. So it just creates a lot of angst in terms of like, how do I get a person to work the way that I want them to work, which all managers want, and sellers are like, I can't work that way because it doesn't allow me to win. So it just creates friction in a place where it actually should help them and improve the way they work and allow them to be better.
One of the things that really stood out to me, what you were just saying, is that when there isn't that visibility and there isn't that process and that understanding, it almost like makes the sellers feel like they have to go it alone, and then they're just doing their own process. And I feel like I know I've heard this from sellers, like they'll turn to a spreadsheet, they'll turn to another system that is outside of the CRM because it just works, or it's just easier, or it just makes it happen faster, right? But then because they're off doing their own thing, there's not that one like source of truth or visibility for the rest of the sales team and then their leadership. And then to your point, like how does the coaching happen if you don't actually have that process set and that visibility? On that same thought of sellers doing their own thing and turning to the spreadsheets, Heather, I'd love to get your thoughts on this, because I know that in the conversations that you and I have had before, this is something that you've seen. You've seen teams struggling with a lot of these challenges. So can you share a little bit more about with us, like all the challenges that you're seeing and some of the typical mishaps that can happen with the CRM and sales tech?
Yeah. I mean, and some of that was like already mentioned. So I'm going to just double click on a couple of those that were mentioned. So one is definitely the idea of working in going it alone and working on, their own sheets and their own notes. If there's not a way for the CRM to be able to give them the interface or the platform that they need in order to be able to do the work they need to do in order to do the actual selling, they are going to go it alone. They are going to be working in their own places, whether it's sheets, notes, separate conversations, and all that's going to live in all these different places. And then you have like the idea of the CRMs being being implemented, maybe they were implemented years ago, right? When they were implemented with, old processes in mind. And maybe the tech has been updated in order as the process changes, but it often isn't done thoroughly. It's done through Band-Aid fixes. And so you end up with this old convoluted interface that that sellers are trying to work through. You have fields everywhere, fields that maybe aren't as relevant anymore, processes, automations, notifications that are no longer relevant, and it just adds all this noise. And it further drives sellers to be working outside of the CRM. So then that CRM is no longer that's like system of record or that source of truth, as you mentioned. And they're constantly, there's all this moving from system to system and pulling things together, which just takes so much time, and it takes the sellers away from what they should be doing, right? Which is actually having conversations with their customers and their prospects.
You mentioned the idea and a pitfall that can happen, which is the Band-Aid fixes, right? Pain. So Andrea, Seth, you all have expressed that you've heard of you've either experienced these challenges yourself, you've worked alongside it, or you've seen it happen again and again and again. And oftentimes when pain is happening, what is like one of our first human reactions to do? It's to stop the pain. And sometimes to stop the pain, the fastest way to do it, but we don't always see, or the long-term impact is to put a Band-Aid on it, right? To just catch up the work and keep going, because we're all moving so fast. We have deals to close. We have prospects to meet with. We have emails to send. There's so much that can happen there. So I want to kind of switch gears on the conversation from instead. I want to challenge the audience to, instead of thinking about, okay, what are just the quick Band-Aid fixes that we could do with our system? Let's take a step back. What are actually some of like the real world enhancements that other teams that our experts have seen work here that we could potentially think about and consider for our own organization to really affect and impact some differences and some change? So, Andrea, I wanted to circle back to you. You started sharing the amazing story of how your team was all the challenges that you were going through when you were thinking about, okay, like, how do we want to make our process better? Reporting wise, what do we want to be able to see? How can we ultimately uncover that lead cemetery that may be hidden right now? So when it came time to optimize the CRM and like better support the sales process and reporting, what were some of the areas that you all focused on first?
Yeah. Well, first I'll say, I think when Heather was speaking, I think she has direct knowledge of what our CRM was like. So a lot of the Band-Aids she probably was imagining in her head was exactly where we were at. So when we decided to take this project on, for us, it was really about focusing in 3 key areas. So one, we knew we needed to clean the data and get the data cleaned up and more manageable. We also knew we needed to define and outline a lead process for our sales team. And then the third piece of it was creating just greater visibility and accountability throughout the funnel, right? So that from a leadership perspective, we had the type of data and reporting we needed to make some more well-informed decisions. So, we had to get the foundation right. So for us, the data hygiene piece was, cleaning up old and aged leads, making sure that we were consistently capturing information that was important to both sales and marketing. So, previously this was a tool just for our sales team, but with marketing coming into the fold, it was imperative that we made sure that there was consistency in all the different fields and information that we were acquiring for each lead and account. Otherwise, without that information, we wouldn't be able to segment out and potentially send targeted messaging to a particular list of people. So it was super important that sales and marketing kind of got on the same page about how the information needed to be cleaned, what fields we needed going forward, and the why behind it, right? It wasn't us just asking the sales team to do busy work. It was, we need these things because this is how marketing is going to be able to help you in return. So the data hygiene piece was kind of mission critical and sort of step one in this. Second, when it came to defining that lead journey, we spent a lot of time working with both sales and marketing to kind of outline what should that experience look like? What do we want sales doing? But also, what do we want marketing doing to help kind of supplement and offset? Sales, obviously, they get a lead. They're trying to make contact via phone and email and trying to get those people to obviously convert into an active fundraiser. But at the same time, marketing can also be doing some stuff to try and reach out to those contacts as well, right? Highlight features and benefits. What makes Little Caesars Fundraising the fundraiser of choice? What type of special offers might we have at that time? And we wanted to make sure that there was a balance between those communications so that we're also not just spamming people who are actively trying to reach out to us, right? We wanted to be thoughtful and intentional in what that journey looked like, what those touch points were, and the cadence in which those touch points were happening. So that was kind of the second layer of that foundation, was really just outlining that piece of it. And then third was creating sort of the reporting and the structure around this new process that we've put in place, right? So, what type of dashboard do we want to create, not just for our sales reps, but for the leadership team as well, so that we can actually look at, leads are coming into the system. And, we establish some very basic statuses. You're either working that lead, you've connected with that lead, you've converted the lead, you've disqualified them for a particular reason, or you're moving them on into the marketing funnel, and marketing will kind of take that lead because maybe they're just not ready to make a decision right now. So we kept it really basic, really easy in terms of those steps. But in also creating those statuses, we then were able to see how quickly can we convert leads? Is there a sales rep who may not be our strongest closer, and maybe there's some in the moment coaching that we can do with that particular sales rep? Do we have a set of sales reps that maybe are closing schools or sports teams more so than other organizations? We then were able to start to get some of that data coming in, which again is just powerful for us at a leadership level, because it then helps us determine everything from our marketing spend to our training programs to where we may want to lean in and potentially segment out special offers to certain groups. It's the possibilities are endless once you kind of have that type of data at your fingertips, which was something we never really had before. So, I think, I know part of the question was, what was the impact? Outside of obviously creating some efficiency, and getting everybody consistently working in the same way, we've seen our conversion rates on average across each rep for this calendar year. It's probably increased 8 to 10%, and it's continuing to climb. So, I would see that number probably double next year. So obviously the conversions have been, the biggest financial impact for us as a business. But in addition to that, the data that we have, the ability to make some better informed decisions, and just the efficiencies that we've created between sales and marketing is invaluable.
You hit on so many amazing points there. One that I wanted to highlight, and I think it goes back to the Band-Aid versus actually taking a step back, being strategic and looking at it holistically, is that that collaboration that sales and marketing did when they were outlining that lead journey and that management process. Because what you said is what is happening in the CRM, that data foundation, that has a ripple effect on the other collaborating organizations and go to market. It has a ripple effect into marketing as far as who they're targeting, the segments, the communications that you're sending. And I also, too, I wanted to just give a big kudos to your team and how you recognize and approached that data hygiene perspective and that foundation, because knowing and bringing it back to the data and knowing that that would affect your reporting, that third layer that you talked about, is huge. Because data projects, sometimes people see it as like the unsexy, project that might take a while. But to your point, if you focus on the right data that you all need when you mapped out that process, what's necessary and what's not. Heather hit on that earlier when you're talking about fields or data that just may not be important anymore. Because you all took that lens and that approach, I really think it's setting you all up for success. And also, that's amazing to hear about the 8 to 10% improvement in conversion rate per seller. That's amazing. Heather, I wanted to get your thoughts. Like Andrea hit on so many points: the data foundation, lead management, reporting. If you were to bring it down more into just some low-hanging fruit that you often see, that sales teams and sales ops organizations could potentially be focusing on in order to optimize their CRM, what are some of those like most frequently like talked about areas that you typically advise teams on?
So I think one thing that Andrea touched on that that I think is huge is getting the alignment. So the alignment from all the teams that are using the system, right? I mean, like there's marketing, there's sales, you may have account teams or customer success teams, and so having that alignment and then looking at the fields that are and the data that is in the system and looking at it. Okay, is all of this relevant? Because I mean, going back to the idea of like the Band-Aid fixes and the small little ad hoc updates. I mean, there are fields people will throw fields up on in the CRM for a short-term solution for something without really thinking about how they're going to use it. Sometimes you have duplicate fields and confusion about what field. So taking a look at it from across the teams and just really understanding, like, what is this for? Is it really relevant for sales? Is it relevant for marketing? And understanding, not just the field itself, but like, in the situations where you have select fields, what are those values? How are they going to be used across all the organization? And then looking at also whether or not they are, whether they're being surfaced to the team at the right time. So I mentioned before, you have potentially from a sales perspective, you could be facing with all of these fields on or convoluted interface that, they're having to scroll around and, and not really having a clear view based on, where the opportunity is or where that prospect or customer is in their life cycle. So, maybe there's opportunity to be able to leverage some of the UI capabilities to be able to surface fields only when they're relevant. So the question is not just like if the data is relevant or the fields are relevant, is when, at what point in the life cycle is it relevant, and surface it then. So then it's just a clearer just picture for teams to be able to just like know exactly what they need to enter, what they need to view in order to be able to pull together what they need and have those and support those conversations. I would say like those are a couple of the key areas. I mean, I think some of that will then fuel conversations around, like the data cleanliness and like, how do we get it up? How do we to make sure that all our data is deduped and we're now, normalizing our data based on all of the relevancy of those fields, based on, similar to what Andrea had mentioned. there's also opportunity to be able to, maybe take some of the manual tasks that are happening and like automating those in even just small incremental ways. So looking at like if there's a way, handoff alerts, right, between teams, and being able to put those triggers in place based on events that are happening, and to be able to pull together the right context. So where those alerts are happening, if they're happening in an email, if they're happening in Slack, or if they're happening wherever that team member is, and it's giving them the whole context of what they need to know, being able to pull all that together, or being able to automate, whatever next steps are in the process, or renewals, for example. So I know this is something that we've had conversations around with Andrea and her team, is looking at, okay, like, we have organizations that will sign up for a pizza kit for this year. Well, there's always next year, right? So how do we look at ways to be able to make that easier for that follow up, and ensuring that we are on top of it, and not waiting for that customer organization to reach out to us.
What you were saying earlier about all of the data that you could potentially be tracking. And one of, I think, the favorite mantras that I've heard our experts say is, just because you can track something doesn't mean you should. And to your point about asking that question of, okay, is this data truly relevant in terms of the context for the seller when they're about to sit down with that buyer and have that conversation? Is this data relevant for marketing? Are they using it to track accounts, to track leads when they're thinking about the targeted communications that they want to send? So asking all those questions that you laid out are super critical. I love how you also touched on looking at the manual processes that are happening, and that I feel like that's such a low hanging fruit right there. If it's painful for sales to do, to the point where Seth touched on it earlier, they're just going to go and do their own thing because it's just faster, or because it just works. If you're hearing those things and you're seeing that happening, low hanging fruit signal right there, I feel can happen. And then you also talked about the handoffs, which I think are so critical, because nailing those and getting those right, that from marketing to sales handoff, and even sales to customer success, that's where a lot of drop off can happen, and context drop off can happen. And for us to really give the seamless, continuous experience that today's buyers expect, I think that's absolutely critical. And I think it brings us full circle to, again, like why Andrea's team approached it the way they did, is because they recognize the importance of that collaboration between sales and marketing. So, absolutely. Now, on that same topic of some of the things that Andrea touched on earlier, one of them was reporting and coaching and visibility. And the idea of how, okay, why is this seller maybe closing more organizations that are, for example, like a school versus another seller? Or why is one seller like having trouble converting at this stage? There's all these questions that a sales leader needs to be able to answer in order to provide that tailored and that impactful coaching. Um, and Seth, I know that Sandler recently announced its sales performance ecosystem. It's a complete system that can help sales leaders measure how sellers are actually implementing best practices and sales methodologies, and bring in that personalized coaching to connect it to revenue. So, when thinking about, how would you advise leaders approaching using the CRM for performance measurement when it actually like comes to improving effectiveness? And then how do you ensure like that they actually have a reliable measure when it's such a challenge for them to get in the first place?
Yeah, I mean, this is something we put a lot of thought into in building out the ecosystem, because we needed it to be simple and we needed it to be visible to the sales leader and to the seller in a way where they didn't have to do a lot of work to get there. And also one thing, and it's been talked about a lot, is it's one of the biggest challenges is how do you gather data? So when you think about performance data, how do you gather that? That's actually much harder than it sounds when you're trying to help customers do that, because sometimes you go to quota like attainment, which is really difficult to get from a customer. It's also very biased too, because the minute you put quota in, it challenges things because it's another variable that could be good or bad. So the area we focused on specifically was like, what is the measure we're trying to move and how do we get it? And CRM was foundationally where we were going to get it. And we took a very simple measure, but a very impactful measure. The most accurate piece of data in a CRM are closed won opportunities. Sellers are more than happy to tell you all the deals they won, how much they won them for, and put them in there and keep those completely visible. So when we built this out, we needed to make it so simple for our customers. So we found we took that as the foundation. We use revenue per rep. So I can take the revenue and consolidate it at the seller level. There's math that needs to be done to reconcile what a hunter and a farmer is and all that stuff. But foundationally, we do revenue per rep, which allows us to very easily get a measure that drives results. So the main goal of the ecosystem is to move away from focusing just on training and really start focusing on growth. So we had to have that foundational measure, and CRM is the place that it exists, and it's very, very easy to get. So that was our starting point. Then the other parts around what we're doing for training, we brought in skills. So when you invest in doing training, you're in basically saying, sellers, I need these are the skills I want you to use on a call to be able to improve outcomes. So we broke those down into very specific skills and lined them up in a way that companies could see using their CRM, using their tools to be able to see, did I use that skill on a call with a customer, like in the real world, not practicing, and how did that affect your deal? So pulling all that stuff together with the CRM as the foundation allows us to be able to give real-time visibility, or at least like within 24-hour visibility to how these sellers are actually performing. So when you think about going into coaching conversations, it's actually really hard to have a skill-based coaching conversation and to do that consistently, because every manager has their own opinion. Every seller has their own unique way. We set that up using foundational data where we do it the same way every time. So when you're getting coaching, the coaching is consistent across all of your sellers, so it can be consistently applied. And that structurally allows us to take data that's coming in and let a seller perform and take your effectiveness and say, I can actually measure what effectiveness is delivering to my business, which really hasn't been visible before. Most of it is hardcore deal numbers and how are you winning the deal? What are you going to get? This is us looking at it from a different perspective to say, are the skills you're using having an impact on the deal when you use them well, when you're not using them, and then consistently coaching up the sales team until they're leveraging those skills to increase the revenue per rep number.
And a major hats off to you and the Sandler team for thinking through all of that and asking those hard questions, right? Like Andrew talked about it earlier, like why is maybe one seller closing certain deals with certain organizations and another seller isn't? And to your point, that visibility of what are the actual sales behaviors, like how are they wording things? How are they asking questions? How are those sales skills and methodologies being applied in actual real conversations with their customers and with their buyers? You hit on how sellers are more than happy to share when they've closed a deal in the CRM. And when you're talking about coaching, Andrew, you had a smile coming across your face. So I just wanted to ask, is there anything that you wanted to add there in terms of like your experience with sales data and then the impact that it's had on the coaching and training for the sales team over at Little Caesars Fundraising?
I mean, I would just reiterate that I think with a new established process for handling leads and with the dashboard reporting that we have, it's unlocked, a wealth of possibilities for us. I mean, on the sales side specifically, yes, it does give our sales leadership team the opportunity to do a lot of in the moment, one-on-one, very prescriptive coaching. So, what used to just be general trainings on certain topics, now they're able to have a one-on-one with somebody who may not, who may need to amplify their closing skills, who may, maybe they're disqualifying people that don't necessarily need to be disqualified. That's the other side of it, is that we're seeing leads go into statuses who then come back via a marketing email. And so then that's a whole other type of coaching, right? To say, like, are you asking the right qualifying questions? Like, what was the thinking behind perhaps disqualifying this, particular fundraiser who actually is running a very successful fundraiser with us. So, it's unlocked a lot of very prescriptive training possibilities on that side. And then I'd say on the marketing side of things, the data that we're now able to get back. I mean, one, we can now do a lot of segmented, targeted messaging that we did not have the ability to do previously because the data wasn't there for us to be able to do it. So I think, again, going back to that base foundational layer of really cleaning the data, it is a painstaking process. I went through it. It's not the most fun, sexy thing to do, but if you can take the time to do it, it truly will pay off. And so from a marketing perspective for us, there's been a lot of wins there in being able to do targeted segmented messaging. We have a clearer idea of what leads marketing is converting versus what the sales team is converting. We're able to actually track back a lot of these lead sources so that, that just gets into us being able to evaluate our marketing dollars and cost per lead against a lot of the tactics that we're using. It's really just unlocked a lot of different possibilities for us. And I think, future state, I mean, we're not stopping here. I think this year was really about getting this foundational layer built. But now that we're starting to get this data, we're starting to see it drive revenue growth and increase retention and increase conversion metrics. Now it's like, okay, well, where do we want to go in this next chapter? And whether that's, we now have data showing us that, there's maybe a need for a territory realignment here down the road with our sales reps. So it's, it's only going to continue to grow from here. And so, yeah, I mean, I think we've been super happy and obviously have gotten a lot of really great benefits and rewards out of this first project that we've done. But I think the sky's the limit for where we're going to go with this.
I loved how you worded that about the data foundation, how this is now opening up a lot of doors. And you said that the sky is the limit. And we kind of touched on it a little bit earlier about how what's happening in the CRM has a ripple effect on the rest of the organization. It also has an impact on your AI and the initiatives that you want to do. If you want to bring AI into your sales process, data is a big piece of that. And Heather, I know you have an opinion on this, and I know you've already experienced this with quite a few organizations. So how would you say prioritizing the CRM not only impacts how sellers perform, but it also sets teams up for success from that data foundation perspective and with AI?
Yeah, I do have some opinions on this. So, I mean, if you're thinking about it from an overall CRM perspective, we're talking a lot about the low hanging fruit and things you can do to help optimize your CRM. And when you do that, there's really a nice domino effect there, right? So you're optimizing the CRM, you're cleaning up you're making it a better experience for sellers to be able to work in it and use it. signifying that higher adoption. And then that's going to just lead into that adoption into that cleaner data. And that clean data is what AI thrives on, and what you need as that fuel for AI to be really effective. And because at the end of the day, the AI is going to be as good as the data and the context that it has. I mean, like you have bad data and you put AI on top of it, it's just going to amplify the AI, right? I mean, or it's just going to amplify that bad data and cause, potential impacts to, your relationships and your brand credibility when you're having those conversations with customers and you're doing it based on that data. So you think of things like, using AI to like help generate, email outreach, or specific, like pulling together information on accounts to help for onboarding new teams onto, for account transitions. If that data isn't accurate, like you're going to be basically like pulling together content that's not effective, that's generic, or that's useless or wrong, and you're sending out potential outreach that's potentially to somebody that's no longer with a company, or it's based on intel or purchases that are not relevant, and it just erodes that trust with the customer. Then without that data in place, like you're from a general perspective, it's you've got like you're I'm focusing so much on the AI piece, and I mean, it is really truly important for it to give it the context for insights and recommendations. But I mean, even just still going back to like the way sellers operate, I mean, you still need to have it there in order to cut down on that admin chaos. And from a leadership perspective, as was mentioned, just to be able to have that oversight into what's going on in the pipeline, what's going on with sales performance and marketing performance. So it is huge across the board, including AI.
When you were talking about the data that you bring in is going to set you up to do well or not well for your AI, I feel that the simplest way to put that is your input affects your output. And one thing that this relates back to is the idea of sales behaviors, and going back to what Seth was saying earlier. So sellers, if you have them continue to do the same behaviors only faster with AI, there's the question of, they may be more efficient because they may be faster, but are they actually being more effective? Are their win rates going up? I don't know. So Seth, I want to get your thoughts on this. How would you advise, as sales leaders are considering approaching AI, bringing it into their sales organization, how can they approach it so then that way not only does it drive efficiency, but it also makes them more effective?
Yeah, I mean, this is the ultimate question, because everyone's bought a whole bunch of AI stuff and nobody's really using it very well, or they're going back to what we talked about earlier. They just let kind of every seller do it however they want to do it. One thing that is really interesting around talking with customers around implementing AI, Gen AI in particular, because that's where a lot of like the really new stuff is you can't do that. Like you shouldn't even try to do Gen AI if you're not doing auto capture of emails, phone calls, web conferencing. If you don't have that, you have no data to build context around. So I would say 80 to 90% of the customers I talk to around that are very eager to implement AI, the minute I ask them about the recording piece, they back away and go, "Oh, I don't think I could do that." It's like, well, I don't think you could do anything really revolutionary with AI. So, I mean, it's starting point wise, as a company, you need to be able to build the trust and also build the infrastructure with your team to where you're capturing all of that stuff, because all that data is where you're going to get your cool, unique insights. So you have to start there. The next thing, when you're thinking about that, it's a lot of companies like to rush out and buy, but we're not at that place anymore because companies have already bought something. I have never run into a company that didn't have a tool that was doing something that they could use for AI summaries or whatever. So the first thing that I always recommend is, like, you need to go in and do a audit. What technology do you have? You shouldn't buy anything AI related until you've proven that the technology you bought, that you've maximized it. So if you do your audit, you go through and you're using the technology and it can't do what you want to do, that's when you buy something new. So you go through and you figure out, like, what do I have? And then based on what I have, what are the most impactful use cases? So go through and list out all the things that I want to do. I want to do summarization. I want to do auto capture. I want to do pre-call prep, post-call follow-up. These are the things that I think I can do with these tools, or at least that's what it says on the box of saying what I can do with AI. And then once you've done that, pick the most important one and become a master of it. Like the biggest mistake, the mistake that happens when people try to implement this is they give sellers 20 different things and say, go do it. And you get this smattering of adoption. Pick the one that is going to have the biggest impact for the business and just myopically focus on becoming the best in the world at doing pre-call prep, best in the world at doing summarization, or using it to create emails for outbound, like whatever it is, like pick that. And once you get really, really, really good at that, then go to the next one until you run out of stuff that you could do with your technology. And then you can invest to make it better and better. You will be infinitely more, you'll get infinitely more value from that technology doing it that way, rather than this scattershot of investing all this money and throwing AI at everything. And then you're really kind of throwing it at nothing. And then when you don't record with any data, then you truly have nothing but a bill for an AI technology that you can't really use.
You are throwing down the mic today. I absolutely love it. Oh my gosh, the bill for technology that no one is using. I feel like that it stings because we know it's so true. It happens. And Seth, I love that advice that you gave about focusing on one and getting really good at it, because it also kind of it leads the idea of like the phased approach, right? Of starting on one, what is going to have the most impact, focusing on that, and then moving it to the next. Because when you do that, you are going to actually see it, like sustained adoption and the improvement that you're ultimately after. But it takes discipline. It does. Andrea, I wanted to get your thoughts. How is your team starting to think about and approach AI for their organization?
Yeah, it's interesting. I mentioned this at the start of the call that, Little Caesars Fundraising, we're a division of Little Caesars, but Little Caesars is also part of, the group of Illich companies, from the Detroit Red Wings to the Detroit Tigers. And so there's a lot of us. We're part of a very big family of companies. And, what's been really great about that is the stance that they have taken on wanting all of the respective companies to really take a look at AI and how we can sort of bring that into our respective areas. So, there was an AI summit that all leadership was a part of about 3 weeks ago. And they brought in a lot of industry leaders in the space to kind of talk to us about AI and sort of the direction of where things are going. We had breakout sessions. And it was really inspiring, but the key takeaways for us was, from a fundraising perspective, is how can we look at AI through the lens of creating efficiencies, scalability, and then obviously ultimately trying to drive growth for our business. And so I think there's a lot of different things we're looking at right now, but I will second what Seth had said earlier, just with respect of we are doing an audit though on what our existing tech stack is, because before we just start throwing out a bunch of AI tools saying we're using AI, we want to make sure that whatever we bring into the fold really truly is there to, drive the business and sort of create efficiencies and supplement wherever we might have some pain points. And so from a marketing standpoint, we're using AI currently daily just for things, just even as simple as just writing copy. I mean, we don't have in-house copywriters to write all of our emails that go out, and we send a lot of them, right? And, I can be, uninspired from day to day and just, I don't feel like writing that day. And so AI is obviously a great tool to help supplement, whether it's writing copy for social posts or emails, or some of our other marketing efforts. We're using AI currently day to day to do that. On the sales side of things, I think one of the other unlocks that has happened in the strong foundation we've created within the CRM is that we're really starting to get a handle on how do we want our sales reps to be spending their active hours, right? Their hours are very precious and valuable to them. And so, what we're starting to pick up on and see is there's also a lot of hours that they are putting into doing things that frankly could probably be automated tasks, could be handled potentially through AI. So that their hours are then being spent, the human hours are really spent having those one-to-one touch points in talking to prospective fundraisers, talking to an active fundraiser who might have questions, versus spending sometimes 3-4 hours a day where they're just kicking out emails, or they're, trying to do outreach and dial to try and get somebody live on the phone and they can't get somebody. So, we're evaluating how can AI kind of come in and take some of those pieces off of the plate of the sales rep so that their hours truly are focused in the most valuable, meaningful, and intentional way. And then I'd say the third piece of it is, we recognize as a raising business that we've got kind of our customer care group using a set of tools. We've got marketing and sales are probably the two departments that are more closely aligned in terms of the systems we're using. But I think the dream, and I'm sure, lots of companies probably feel this way, is you sort of want everybody kind of operating out of one system together. And what a dream it would be if something like that existed. So I think, again, going back to that audit, not only are we auditing the systems and sort of what every group and department needs, but we are then looking at how does AI potentially come in to help solve for some of that. So early days, but again, I think it's nice to be working for a company that, we are widely encouraged to obviously try and help solve where we can through the use of AI.
Absolutely. And I just, again, kudos to your team for having the discipline to like think about it from an audit perspective of, okay, like what are we actually using today? Where do we want our people spending their time? I think that is such a critical question to be asking and thinking about, okay, what is taking up their time? What could we automate? What could be done with AI? Where do we want to still keep the human in the loop? I think those are all such critical questions to be asking when you're thinking about how to approach AI. On that same topic of the audit and approaching the CRM and sales technology. So, not necessarily just in the site of AI, but focusing on the technology that the sales team is using. Heather, I wanted to get your thoughts on this. How do you typically guide teams to start approaching that evaluation process?
Yeah, I think a key piece to this is sort of looking at it in two ways. One is looking at it from the perspective of the customer or the buyer, right? So like going through that entire customer journey and understanding, all the touch points, all the points of interaction. And then when doing that, looking for those areas of friction and asking questions like, how fast did they get a response after filling a form? Or how many times a customer has, had to repeat themselves to different people throughout their journey. So looking for all of those pieces and areas of friction, and making note of those. Then looking at it from a seller perspective, right? So looking at it as, just understanding, like shadowing them, looking at what they're doing. What are all the manual tasks? How many browsers or tabs are they jumping from, in systems? Are they jumping from system to system? What are they copying and pasting from one thing into the other, right? All those little pieces that end up, sometimes are like just part of the day-to-day that if you're looking at it from like a seller's perspective, maybe they recognize it, but from an objective perspective, you can pick out all kinds of things that maybe that could be smoother or seamless for them. And then when you look at it from those two perspectives, you're going to see some overlap in friction, right, for both of them. And I would say like that's potentially areas that you could prioritize in terms of what to focus on and what to optimize. Because when you do that, I mean, like 9 times out of 10, those are going to be areas in the transition process or the handoff process, right, where there's some information or knowledge that's been lost. And by looking at that and tightening up those handoff areas, those could be areas that like benefit not just the seller, but you're also the customer, the buyer, and just improving that experience overall.
Something that you said about the insights or like where is the data being lost? And I think that brings us back to visibility. So Seth, going back to the idea of the sales performance ecosystem and gaining visibility into how sellers are actually applying methodologies in their daily habits and daily conversations, sales leaders need to consider, okay, like how do I actually bring all of this into my sales tech and what my sales teams are doing today? So how would you advise leaders to start thinking about approaching this?
First thing is to realize that it's possible. So if you talk about deal management, that's very clear in how you would execute that, right? I have a deal, I'm trying to close it, I'm working back and forth to figure out how do I win it. It's very foreign to enablement teams to realize that the skills are actually impacting the deals because it's never been visible before. You've never been able to take a skill, make it visible, and show how it quantitatively takes the one seller and makes them better or worse than the other, depending on how they perform. So the mindset of that does not exist in sales. It is crazy that you have this industry that's been around for 60 plus years training salespeople, and it's kind of all on yeah, we think it works, so we're going to buy it type thing. Like it actually isn't data backed in a large extent. So I mean, you have some like that are looking at it and you sell training, you go, God, I hope they had a good year, because if they have a good year, it worked. If you had a bad year, it didn't. And it's like, well, that's not really true, because you have this other part of this, which is adoption, that you can't see either. And once you get adoption visible, it allows you to do a lot of different things. So the biggest thing that we focused on with this is you just need to start. It's possible no matter where you are. And the reason I say that is like the way that we've built it is you have 3 tools that you basically use. You use role play, you use AI role play, you use the CRM, and you use conversation intelligence or web conferencing. Every organization that I know of has web conferencing. So that's a pathway for you to be able to get calls in the flow of work. The way we set it up is the role plays we do at specific times. So we make that available just as part of doing this service. So they get access to it. They can do more if they want to, but we were very thoughtful in trying to build a solution for customers so they don't have to worry about the tech being in the way. So if you don't have any of that stuff, or you're not using it in that way yet, we have a way to help you. It's not as good as it would be if you use some of this other stuff, but you could evolve to it. And we set it up in a way that as you evolve, you just get better and better and better. But I think a lot of it is just kind of, you get the mindset right, and then we're trying to get out of the way and meet the person where they are so they can make the most of their training with where they are today. And then also the cool part is to be able to help them go further. So if we're doing it through role play now, let's have a conversation around how do you adopt and capture web conferencing calls. So then we could bring that in as well and just kind of progress them along, but not lock them out. It was really important to us to not say, okay, you want to use this? Well, you have to buy this tool, and this tool. And until you have that, just go away. We won't be talking to you. We want it to be available to all, and then they can evolve in how they use it.
I love that, because it goes back to what you were saying about meeting the salesperson and the sales organization where they are and not letting the tech get in the way. And I think that that theme right there really summarize everything that we're talking about today. Like, we don't want the CRM and sales technology to be in the way of your sellers and your sales leadership. We want it to work with them and for them. Andrea, you've experienced a lot on this topic. When it comes to like a lasting piece of advice that you could potentially give to other leaders that are in your shoes or have felt some of the pains that you were discussing earlier, what would you say to them?
Yeah, I mean, for me, it's, well, there's a lot I would say, because it's definitely been a journey. But if you're a company that's utilizing a CRM, experiencing some of the pain points that we were, and obviously looking to, whether it's bring on an implementation partner or look at a new software, whatever, I would say, I mean, one, it always starts with, and I didn't say this at the beginning, but before joining LCF, I've been on the creative agency side most of my career. So for me, any project kind of starts with a really great brief, like outlining what is it that you are trying to accomplish, who are the stakeholders that need to be involved, what is your budget, what is your timeline, what does success look like. Really just trying, outlining all the pain points, kind of gathering all of that up together to ensure that, at the start of whatever this is, you're bringing on a new technology, you're bringing on a partner to help you sort through your technology. You just sort of had a clear understanding of what it is you're trying to do, right? I think second from that, and this was something that was super critical for us, was making sure that you're bringing along all the right people along the journey. There's nothing worse than you're charging down a path with an implementation partner, or you're developing a tool or what have you, and you haven't brought in the right people, and then you launch it, and then all the dreadful feedback comes of like everything that's wrong with it that you didn't think about, right? So while it may take more time to bring those people along and get that feedback as you're going along towards launch of something, I can't stress enough, it will save you more time and money in the long run if you do it that way. And so for us, it really was about working hand in hand with our, not just sales leadership, but actually bringing some sales reps into the fold to get their opinion on things that we were going to change and steps that we were going to outline in the new lead process. We brought in, several people from the marketing team. We brought in people from customer care just to get everybody's feedback, because maybe there was something we didn't think of. Maybe there was a better way of thinking about something. So, bringing those people along the journey just makes it infinitely easier at launch, because by then you've got the majority of people kind of bought into what you're doing and why you're doing it. And I'd say the third piece of advice I would give is recognize that implementation isn't the finish line in this. We launched, but we're not stopping there. And, it's an ever evolving thing. I mean, that's just technology in general, right? There's always going to be a new facet of a piece of technology or a new product or something coming out. So I think just recognizing that just because you've launched the thing doesn't mean it's not going to need to be cared for or updated, or, further implementations are needed. And in that vein, I think it's super important too to stress, training and documenting and creating SOPs for everything that you're doing. Because while you may be training the existing crew of sales reps and the marketing team and the customer care team that's here today, people move on, people get promoted, people move into other areas, and having those training documents and SOPs and stuff that you can then hand over to any new user coming in. I mean, thankfully, we did think of that. I've been with other companies that didn't think about that, and it can be disastrous. So, just making sure that you're kind of documenting all of those things, and that you're always kind of looking toward the future to see how can you keep improving this thing to drive the business forward.
So to summarize, everyone, get a clear understanding, bring the right people along with you. Oh my gosh, there's so much wisdom in that. And then also to just double click into bringing the right people. I love how you all brought sales reps in with you. It's so critical to have that seller champion that knows what's happening. It can help be that peer-to-peer champion alongside those other sellers to say, hey, I've seen this process. I understand the goal. I know that if we do it the way that they're showing us or trying to guide us to, that it will work. So I think having that champion is huge. And then you also talked about how implementation is not the finish line. To Seth's point, when you implement one tool, get really good at it, and then think about, okay, what's next? What does the future look like? What is the next phase that's going to help us drive that growth? And then your fourth point about document, write it down, have that standard operating procedure, because you never know in terms of like turnover, promotions, what can happen. And you want to make that onboarding process as seamless as possible. So then that way that salesperson can have an even faster ramp time than they might have had before. So thank you so much for sharing that wisdom. Now, I want to all talk about, okay, next steps, because we want you to actually start to apply and think about what we've talked about today, because you can talk about it all you want, but if you don't actually take action, then things are going to continue to be the way they are. And that, again, the pain that everyone spoke about earlier, it doesn't do any good just to keep putting Band-Aids on top of it to fix issues that are still going to be there next week, next month, right? Okay, so step one, where's the friction? Where are your sellers having that pain? To Andrew's point, where are they spending their time? To Seth's point, what sales behaviors or what visibility is your leadership not able to see today? When you start asking all of those questions, and what Heather said earlier about thinking about the buyer's experience, you're going to start uncovering that low-hanging fruit and that friction of, okay, where should we start to prioritize how we can optimize our sales tech and bring all of this into the fold, and what is going to have the biggest impact? And then to that, start with some impactful wins, right? Because you want to prove value first and then scale. And what Andrea said about bringing in an implementation partner or just bringing in a third-party expert, seriously considering that, because when you do, it helps you not only get an expert's perspective, but it also can help you fast track that time to value in terms of your audit and getting you that ultimate roadmap that you're really trying to aim for, to know, okay, what do we need to do first to really start having an impact on our sales process and our sales performance? And then that also just leads me into tap into expertise, right? Seth talked about that sales performance ecosystem. And then there's also Sandler Consulting. So getting that third party insight into your sales process, into your sales behaviors can really help make a difference. So if you scan those QR codes, you'll be able to take a look at some of those resources that I was just talking about from that seller experience audit perspective that Heather was alluding to earlier. And then also just getting in contact with the Sandler team to get their thoughts on everything that you're dealing with right now and where you might want to go. And the last step is I would be amiss if I didn't mention one of the biggest conferences coming up in the Salesforce ecosystem is Dreamforce. So if you will be in San Francisco at the time, definitely please come and meet the team there. We'll have several of our team members there in person. We are hosting a welcome bash. Yes, it's for marketers. It's also for salespeople too. So definitely bring your marketing colleagues, bring your team members, find your peers and industry experts even before the main event starts on that Monday night. And then we'll also be hosting the Growth Lounge at the Yerba Buena Bar all week, where you can come in, get away from like the conference buzz and the hustle, recharge, refuel, and also get some one-on-one insights with our experts. So with that, I wanted to give you all a big thank you for attending today's session, and also a huge thank you to our experts on our panel today. We greatly appreciate you all sharing your expertise with us. Okay. And with that, I hope you all have a great day. Thank you, everyone.